The massive space station turned slowly against the backdrop of Kepler 442b, its metal surface catching starlight like a jewel in the void. Lee Tae-min stood at the observation deck watching the morning shift change through the transparent aluminum windows. He held his coffee cup with both hands, the warmth spreading through his fingers as he watched maintenance crews float between the station's outer hull sections. 3 years ago, nobody would have believed that humans would be running the most prestigious school in the galaxy. The Galactic Academy Station housed over 2,000 students from 47 different species, all learning to work together in what the galaxy called the Great Cooperation. Tae-min had been a colonel in Earth's Space Marines before taking this job, and some days he missed the simplicity of military life where orders were orders and regulations were regulations. The Academy was different. Here, every species brought their own rules, their own ideas about right and wrong, and their own ways of solving problems. The Zentarans believed in mathematical solutions to everything. The Vorthans used collective decision-making that could take weeks. The crystalline Therians communicated through light patterns that most other species found impossible to follow. Somehow, Tae-min had to make it all work. His communicator buzzed against his wrist. "Administrator Lee, we have an incoming transport from the Keth Mori system," came the voice of Park So-ra, his head of academics. "They're requesting immediate docking clearance and full ceremonial honors." Tae-min sipped his coffee and watched a small transport ship approach the station. Even from a distance, he could see it was built for war rather than diplomacy. Sharp edges, dark metal, and weapon ports that were barely concealed. The Keth Mori had been the galaxy's apex predators for over 3,000 years, and they never let anyone forget it. "Grant docking clearance to Bay 7, he replied. "No ceremonial honors, they're students here, not visiting dignitaries. Standard Academy protocols apply to everyone." There was a pause. "Sir, they're specifically requesting the full honor guard treatment. The message says it would be inappropriate to treat a Keth Mori as a common student." Tae-min finished his coffee and headed toward the lift. "Then it's a good thing we're here to teach them what appropriate means. I'll meet them at the docking bay. Send Kang Dong-woo to assist with baggage handling." The lift carried him down through 17 levels of the station. Each level buzzed with activity as students hurried between classes, study groups formed in common areas, and teachers prepared for the day ahead. The Academy never truly slept, with species from different time zones keeping various schedules. Night shifts overlapped with day shifts in a constant dance of education and social interaction. At Bay 7, Tae-min found Dong-woo waiting with a standard baggage cart and student orientation packet. The young security officer had joined the Academy staff straight from Earth Space Academy, eager to see the galaxy and help build bridges between species. His enthusiasm sometimes outweighed his experience, but his heart was always in the right place. "First Keth Mori student?" Dong-woo asked, adjusting his uniform. "First one we've had at the Academy," Tae-min replied. "They've never seen much point in education beyond combat training and territorial expansion. This is either a sign that they're finally ready to join galactic civilization, or it's some kind of test to see how we handle their presence." The docking bay doors opened with a mechanical hiss and the Keth Mori transport settled onto the landing pad. Tae-min had seen images of the Keth Mori before, but nothing quite prepared him for seeing one in person. The creature that emerged from the transport stood 8 feet tall, its natural armor plating a deep black that seemed to absorb light. Retractable claws extended briefly from its fingertips before sliding back into hidden sheaths. Its eyes were golden and unblinking, designed for tracking prey across vast distances. Behind the student came 3 adult Keth Mori, each wearing ceremonial armor that marked them as high-ranking military officers. The lead figure, whose armor bore the distinctive markings of a war commander, stepped forward and spoke in the universal trade language. "I am War Commander Zenthkala of the Keth Mori Defense Fleet. This is Vexathara, child of the noble house, Kethaverin. We have come to observe how lesser species attempt to educate their superiors." Tae-min stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back in a position he had learned during his military service. "Welcome to Galactic Academy Station. I'm Administrator Lee Tae-min. We're pleased to have Vexathara as our student. All students receive the same orientation regardless of species or background." War Commander Zenthakala's golden eyes narrowed slightly. You misunderstand, human. Vexithara is here to observe your teaching methods, not to be taught by you. The Kethmori have dominated this galaxy for millennia. We do not require instruction from species who have barely learned to leave their home planet. Dongwu shifted, uncomfortably beside his cart, but Tae Min remained perfectly still. I understand your position, War Commander. However, all students at this academy follow the same rules, attend the same classes, and complete the same requirements for graduation. If Vexithara is here as an observer only, then we can arrange a different program. But if Vexithara is here as a student, then academy regulations apply without exception. The young Kethemori, Vexithara, had remained silent during this exchange, but now stepped forward. I will follow your human customs while I am here. It will be amusing to see what you believe you can teach me. There was something in the way Vexithara spoke that suggested this was not mere politeness. The young Kethemori was genuinely curious, even if that curiosity was wrapped in layers of species superiority and predatory confidence. Taiman recognized the tone from his own military experience with new recruits who thought they already knew everything. Excellent, Taimin said, gesturing toward Dongwu. Officer Kang will help you with your belongings and show you to your dormitory assignment. Classes begin tomorrow morning at 800 station time. War Commander Zenthkala stepped closer to Tae-min, close enough that the human could smell the metallic scent of the Kethmori's natural armor. Human Administrator, understand this clearly. Vexthara is not just any Kethmori. This young one is destined for great things in our fleet. If any harm comes to Vexthara, or if any lesser species dares to show disrespect, the consequences will be severe. Taemin met the War Commander's golden gaze without flinching. War Commander, I appreciate your concern for your student. However, at this academy, respect is earned through behavior and academic achievement, not through threats or intimidation. Vexithara will be treated exactly like every other student here, with fairness, dignity, and appropriate consequences for choices. The tension in the docking bay was thick enough to cut with a blade. Dongwu had gone very still beside his baggage cart, probably calculating whether he could reach the emergency alarm if things went badly. But after a long moment, War Commander Zenthkala stepped back. Very well, human. We shall see how your methods work with true predators. Vexithara, remember who you are and what you represent. Do not allow these soft creatures to make you weak. The 3 adult Kethmori returned to their transport without further ceremony. The ship lifted off with barely a sound, leaving Vexithara alone with the 2 humans in the vast docking bay. So, Dongwu said after a moment, that went better than I expected. Nobody died. Vexithara's golden eyes fixed on the young security officer. The day is still young, small human, but there was something almost playful in the way the Kethemori said it, as if testing boundaries rather than making genuine threats. Taemin recognized the behavior from countless new students over the years, each one trying to figure out how this strange place worked and where they fit into it. Officer Kang will show you to your quarters, Taemin said. Tomorrow you'll meet with Ms. Park Sora for academic placement testing. She's our head of academics and specializes in helping students from different species find their learning strengths. And if I refuse to take your tests, then you'll have a very boring semester sitting in your room instead of learning anything interesting. The choice is entirely yours. Vexthara considered this for a moment, head tilted in what might have been curiosity or confusion. You speak as if I have power to choose my own actions here. You do. Every student does. That's how education works. We provide opportunities to learn and grow. You decide whether to take advantage of them or not. As Dongwu led Vexithara away, toward the dormitory levels, Taiman remained in the docking bay for a few more minutes. In his experience, the most challenging students often became the most rewarding ones to teach. They just needed to discover that learning was more interesting than intimidating others. He pulled out his personal log and made a quick entry. New Kethmori student arrived today. Vexithara shows typical apex predator assumptions about hierarchy and respect. Recommend standard procedures with close monitoring. Potential for significant growth if student can move beyond species superiority complex. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but that was nothing new at Galactic Academy Station. 3 days had passed since Vexithera arrived at Galactic Academy Station, and the young Kethmori had already established what the species considered the natural order of things. During meal times, other students gave Vexithera a wide berth, instinctively moving away when the apex predator approached the food dispensers. In the corridors, smaller species pressed themselves against walls as Vexithera walked past, their survival instincts overriding their rational knowledge that they were safe on the station. Park Sora had been watching these interactions with the clinical interest of an experienced teacher. She had seen this pattern before with students from dominant species, though never quite this extreme. The Zentaurans could be mathematically arrogant. The Therians often acted superior due to their advanced crystalline intelligence, but the Kethmori were apex predators in the truest sense. Every fiber of their being was designed to hunt, kill, and dominate. At her desk in Classroom 7, Sora finished preparing her lesson materials for comparative galactic ethics. Today's topic was cooperation versus competition in species development, using Earth's history as a case study. She had chosen this subject specifically because she knew it would challenge some of Vexithara's fundamental assumptions about how successful civilizations developed. The classroom filled slowly as students arrived for the morning session. The Vorthons entered in their typical group formation, communicating through subsonic vibrations that other species couldn't hear. 2 Zentaurans sat in the front row, their large heads already bent over mathematical tablets as they calculated optimal seating arrangements for learning efficiency. A small cluster of crystalline Therians took positions near the windows where the starlight could supplement their natural luminescence. Vexthara entered last, golden eyes scanning the room for potential threats or challenges. The young Kethmori had learned the layout of the classroom during the first day and always chose the same seat, positioned to provide clear sight lines to all entrances and exits. The chair creaked under the weight of natural armor plating as Vexthera settled into what the species called a combat-ready position. "Good morning, everyone," Sora said, activating the holographic display at the front of the room. Today, we're discussing how different species achieved interstellar travel and joined the galactic community. We'll be looking at cooperation models versus conquest models and examining the long-term effectiveness of each approach. The hologram showed a 3-dimensional map of known space, with different colored markers indicating various species territories and expansion patterns. The Kethmori territory was marked in deep red, spreading across 17 star systems in a pattern that clearly showed military conquest rather than diplomatic expansion. "Let's start with the Vorthons," Sora continued. "How did your species achieve space travel?" One of the Vorthons, a peaceful creature covered in soft blue fur, spoke in the universal trade language. "We developed space travel through collective effort. Every member of our society contributed knowledge and resources. No single individual or group controlled the process." Sora nodded and pointed to the Vorthon territory on the map, which spread across 12 systems in a network of interconnected colonies. "Notice the pattern here. Vorthon expansion followed trade routes and resource-sharing agreements. Their colonies are all connected by mutual support networks." Vexthara made a sound. That might have been amusement or disdain. Collective effort is the strategy of prey species. The weak band together because they cannot survive individually. Several smaller students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Sora remained perfectly calm, turning to face the young Kethmori directly. "That's an interesting perspective, Vexithara. Can you explain how the Kethmori achieved space travel?" "Through strength and superior intelligence," Vexithara replied without hesitation. "The strongest Kethmori developed the technology, conquered those who possessed resources and took what was needed. Efficiency through dominance." "And how many Kethmori were involved in developing your first spacecraft?" Vexithara paused, golden, eyes narrowing slightly. "The exact number is not important. What matters is that the strongest led and the weak followed." Sora pulled up a new section of the holographic display showing Earth's space program history. Let me show you how humans achieved space travel. Our first successful moon landing involved over 400,000 people working together. Engineers, scientists, mathematicians, factory workers, computer programmers, and support staff. No single human could have accomplished this alone. The display showed images of humans working in groups, sharing information, building components together, and celebrating collective achievements. Vexithara watched with what appeared to be confusion mixed with contempt. "This is exactly what I mean," the young Kethamori said. "Humans required hundreds of thousands, because individually you are weak. A truly superior species would need only a few strong individuals. Yet humans reached space first among the newer species in this sector," Sora replied. "And we did it through cooperation, not conquest. We shared our technology freely with other species, which is why we were invited to establish this academy." Small crystalline student named Silandra raised one glowing appendage. "May I contribute to this discussion? My species also achieved space travel through cooperation, though our methods were different from both humans and Vorthans." Sora smiled encouragingly. "Of course, Silandra. Please share your thoughts." But as Silandra began to speak about Therian, collaborative crystal growing techniques, Vexithara's posture shifted. The young Kethmori's armor plates rustled slightly, and a subtle but unmistakable scent began to fill the classroom. It was a pheromone that every prey species in the galaxy recognized at an instinctual level. The scent that meant a Kethmori was preparing to assert dominance. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. The Vorthans pressed themselves back in their chairs, their soft fur standing on end in alarm. The Zentorans' large eyes went wide with fear, their mathematical calculations forgotten. Silandra's crystalline structure flickered rapidly between colors as panic overrode conscious thought. The small crystal creature should not speak when superior beings are discussing important matters, Vexthara said, the pheromone release intensifying. Prey species exist to serve predators, not to offer opinions. The classroom had gone completely silent except for the rapid breathing of frightened students. Several of the smaller species were exhibiting clear flight responses, their bodies preparing to run even though their minds knew they were safe on the academy station. Sora had not moved from her position at the front of the classroom. She did not show any sign of fear or submission. Instead, she walked directly toward Vexithara, moving through the pheromone cloud as if it were nothing more than morning mist. "Mr. Vexithara," she said calmly, stopping directly in front of the young Kethamori's desk. "That behavior is a violation of Academy regulations regarding intimidation of other students. Please report to Administrator Lee's office after class for detention." The silence in the classroom became so complete that the station's air recycling system seemed loud by comparison. Vexithara stared at the human teacher with golden eyes that showed complete shock. In the young Kethmori's entire life, no being had ever responded to a dominance display by giving instructions. "You dare to discipline me?" Vexithara asked, voice dropping to a dangerous growl. The retractable claws extended slightly from their sheaths. "I am Kethmori. We do not receive discipline from prey species." Sora adjusted her teaching glasses and consulted her lesson tablet. "You are a student in my classroom, and all students follow Academy rules. The intimidation of other students through pheromone displays is specifically prohibited in Section 4 of the Student Conduct Guidelines. Detention today at 1500 hours. And if I refuse, then you will receive additional detention. Time until you comply. Academy rules apply to every student regardless of species, size, or personal opinions about their own importance." Vexithara rose from the chair, natural armor making soft scraping sounds as the plates adjusted. At full height, the young Kethamori towered over the human teacher, claws now fully extended and gleaming in the classroom lighting. "Human," Vexithara said, voice filled with the kind of deadly promise that had made the Kethmori feared across the galaxy. "Do you understand what I am? Do you know what my species does to those who show disrespect?" Sora looked up at the apex predator without any visible fear or concern. "I know exactly what you are, Mr. Vexithara. You are a student who just earned himself an extra hour of detention for threatening a teacher. Would you like to try for 2 extra hours?" The other students watched in fascination and terror as the standoff continued. Never in galactic history had anyone seen a human face down a Kethmori through pure stubbornness and adherence to rules. Most species either submitted immediately or prepared for combat. After what felt like an eternity, Vexthara's claws slowly retracted back into their sheaths. The pheromone release stopped, allowing the other students to begin breathing normally. Again, the young Kethmori sat back down, but the golden eyes never left Sora's face. "I will report to Administrator Lee at the designated time," Vexithara said quietly. News of the detention spread through Galactic Academy Station faster than a plasma fire. By lunchtime, every student knew that the impossible had happened. A human teacher had put a Kethmori in detention. The story grew with each telling, becoming more dramatic as it passed from species to species through the station's social networks. In the Zentoran dormitories, mathematical minds calculated the probability of Vexithara actually reporting for detention. Their computers showed a 97% chance that the young Kethmori would either ignore the directive entirely or respond with violence. The 3% margin for error was attributed to insufficient data about human psychology. The Beer Vorthan students gathered in their collective discussion circles, debating whether Teacher Sora's action represented courage or complete madness. Their consensus-based decision-making processes struggled to comprehend how a single individual could make such a bold choice without consulting the group first. Even the usually calm Therians flickered with excited light patterns as they discussed the implications. Their crystalline minds processed information through shared harmonic frequencies, and the vibrations of anticipation resonated through their dormitory levels. Lee Tae-min sat in his administrative office, reviewing the incident report that So-Ra had filed according to standard protocols. The document was refreshingly straightforward. Student exhibited intimidating behavior toward classmates, received appropriate disciplinary response per academy guidelines. Student acknowledged detention. Assignment. No mention of species-specific concerns or requests for special handling. He had been expecting communication from the Kethmori military by now, demanding explanations or threatening consequences. The silence from their fleet was almost more concerning than threats would have been. In his experience, apex predators were most dangerous when they were planning rather than reacting. At 1400 hours, students began gathering in the corridors near the administrative offices. They pretended to study, socialize, or handle routine business, but everyone was really waiting to see whether Vexithara would appear for detention. Some had brought recording devices, hoping to document what they expected would be either a historic moment or a tragic disaster. Kang Dongwoo noticed the unusual crowd during his security rounds. Students from dozens of species clustered in small groups, all facing toward Administrator Lee's office while trying to appear casual about their presence. He activated his communicator to report the situation. "Administrator Lee, we have approximately 200 students gathering near your office. I think they're here to watch the detention situation. Should I disperse them?" Taemin's voice crackled back through the comm system. "Let them stay if they're not disrupting normal operations. This might be educational for everyone involved. Just make sure the corridors remain clear for regular traffic." Inside his office, Taemin continued his paperwork while keeping an eye on the chronometer. 1500 hours approached with mechanical precision, and he found himself curious about which choice Vexithara would make. The young Kethmori was clearly intelligent despite the species' reputation for solving problems through violence. Intelligence could go either way in situations like this. At exactly 1500 hours, Vexithara appeared in the corridor leading to the administrative offices. The crowd of watching students fell silent as the apex predator moved through their midst. The young Kethmori's armor plates were perfectly arranged, posture radiating the controlled confidence that made the species so formidable. But there was something different in the golden eyes, a quality that experienced teachers learned to recognize in students who were genuinely wrestling with new concepts. The office door chimed softly as Vexithara approached. "Enter," came Taemin's voice from inside. Vexithara stepped into the office and found Administrator Lee sitting behind his desk, reading reports on a tablet as if this were any other afternoon. The office was deliberately unremarkable, furnished with standard academy equipment and decorated with photographs from various graduation ceremonies. Nothing in the room suggested that its occupant was anything other than a dedicated educator. Mr. Vexthara, Taman said without looking up. Please take a seat at the desk by the window. You'll find writing materials and your detention assignment. The young Kethamori moved to the indicated desk, which was clearly designed for humanoid students rather than 8-foot apex predators. The chair was too small, the desk too low, and the writing implements obviously created for much smaller hands. Everything about the situation emphasized that Vexthara was being treated exactly like any other misbehaving student. On the desk was a single sheet of paper with printed instructions. Write a 1,000-word essay explaining why intimidation, tactics violate academy conduct codes and how they interfere with the educational process. Use specific examples from today's classroom incident. Essay must demonstrate understanding of how fear prevents learning. Vexthara stared at the assignment for several minutes without moving. The concept of writing about behavior was foreign to a species that traditionally solved problems through immediate action. Kethamori education focused on combat techniques, territorial strategy, and species dominance. Self-reflection was not part of their cultural framework. Human administrator, Vexthara said finally. Do you understand what I am? Tamin continued reading his reports. You are a student who used intimidation tactics in teacher Sora's classroom and is now serving detention as a consequence. I am Kethamori. My species has conquered 17 star systems. We are the apex predators of this galaxy. We do not write essays about our behavior. That's interesting background information, but it doesn't change your assignment. 1,000 words about intimidation and learning. The door will remain locked until you complete the essay. To test this claim, Vexthara rose and approached the office door. It was solidly sealed, designed to contain various alien physiologies and enhanced strength levels. The young Kethamori's natural power meant nothing against human engineering that had been specifically created for academy security purposes. How long will you keep me here? As long as it takes for you to complete your assignment. Some students finish in an hour. Others take considerably longer. The choice is entirely yours. Vexthara returned to the desk and picked up one of the writing implements. The pen looked ridiculously small in hands designed for rending and tearing, but the young Kethamori managed to grip it awkwardly and begin forming letters on the paper. Outside, in the corridors, the watching students maintained their vigil. Word spread through the station that Vexthara had actually reported for detention and was apparently writing the assigned essay. The impossible was happening in real time, and nobody wanted to miss any part of it. Dongwu entered the office carrying a cup of coffee for Administrator Li. He nodded politely to Vexthara, as if having a Kethamori serving detention was perfectly normal. First time with academy discipline procedures? He asked conversationally. Don't worry, everyone gets through it eventually. The essay questions can be tricky until you get used to thinking about behavior instead of just acting on instinct. The casual nature of the interaction seemed to unbalance Vexthara more than any threat or challenge could have. Here was another human treating the situation as routine, even mundane. It was completely outside the young Kethamori's experience with how other species typically responded to their presence. Do all students receive detention? Vexthara asked. When they break academy rules, sure. Last week I had to process detention for 3 Zentaurans who tried to mathematically prove that their homework was unnecessary. Before that, a group of Vorthons got detention for collective decision-making during an individual exam. Rules are rules, regardless of species. Dongwu left the coffee on Taemin's desk and departed with the same casual friendliness he had shown upon entering. Vexthara watched him go, then returned attention to the essay assignment with something that might have been genuine curiosity. 2 hours passed in surprising quiet. Vexthara worked steadily on the assignment, occasionally pausing to consider word choices or examine the events from different angles. The process of analyzing behavior, rather than simply acting on instinct, was mentally exhausting in ways that combat training had never been. Through the office windows, the young Kethamori could see other students engaged in various activities across the station. Groups studied together in the common areas. Different species played recreational games that required cooperation rather than competition. A mixed group of Vorthons and Therians worked together on what appeared to be an art project, their different abilities complementing each other perfectly. For the first time in Vexthara's life, the young predator was observing rather than dominating a social environment. The experience was both fascinating and deeply uncomfortable. These species that should have been cowering in fear were thriving together, accomplishing things that no single species could manage alone. "Administrator Lee," Vexithara said during the third hour of detention, "why are you not afraid of me?" Taemin looked up from his work. "Should I be? You haven't given me any reason to fear you. My species has dominated yours since before humans achieved space travel." 6 hours into detention, Vexithara finally set down the small pen and flexed clawed fingers that were cramping from the unfamiliar grip required for human writing implements. The essay had grown far beyond the required 1,000 words as the young Kethmori discovered that examining behavior was more complex than initially expected. The assignment had forced Vexithara to think about concepts that no Kethmori education had ever covered. What did intimidation actually accomplish? Why did fear reduce learning instead of encouraging it? How did cooperative species manage to achieve things that seemed impossible through pure dominant strategies? These questions had no simple answers, which was itself a revelation. Kethmori culture provided clear solutions to most problems through the application of superior strength and predatory instincts. But the classroom situation had presented a challenge that could not be solved through traditional methods. Taemin glanced at the chronometer and noticed that normal duty hours had ended, while his unusual detention student worked through the assignment. The administrative offices had grown quiet as regular staff departed for their evening activities. Only the soft sound of Vexthara's writing and the station's background systems hummed in the space between them. "How is the essay progressing?" Taemin asked, the first direct conversation he had initiated during the detention period. "It is more difficult than I expected," Vexthara admitted. "Kethmori education does not include analysis of behavior or motivation. We learn what works through trial and combat, not through examination of why it works." "That's actually a very insightful observation. What else have you discovered during this process?" Vexthara paused, golden eyes focusing on something beyond the office windows where other students were visible in the common areas. "I have been watching the other species interact while writing this assignment. They accomplish tasks together that would be impossible for individuals working alone. This seems inefficient from a Kethmori perspective, but the results suggest otherwise. Can you give me a specific example?" "The crystal beings and the fur creatures are building something in the recreational area. Neither species could complete the project individually, but together they are succeeding. The crystal beings provide structural support while the fur creatures handle delicate assembly work. Their different abilities complement each other." Taemin nodded, recognizing the project Vexthara was observing. "That's a joint art installation being created by Therian and Vorthon students for the upcoming Unity Festival. They've been planning it for months, combining Therian harmonic resonance with Vorthon textile techniques." "Planning for months?" Vexthara's voice carried genuine surprise. "Kethmori solve problems immediately through decisive action. Long-term planning is considered inefficient." "How has immediate action worked for your species' development over the past 1,000 years?" The question hung in the air, while Vexithara considered the implications. Kethmori civilization had remained essentially unchanged for millennia, focused on military conquest and territorial expansion. They had developed advanced weapons and spacecraft, but their social structures, educational systems, and cultural practices were identical to those of their ancient ancestors. "We have maintained our position as apex predators," Vexithara said finally. But the response lacked the usual Kethmori confidence. "Maintained, yes. But have you grown? Have you developed new capabilities or solved problems that your ancestors could not solve?" This was dangerous territory for any Kethmori to consider. Their entire cultural identity was built on the assumption that they had achieved perfection through evolutionary superiority. The idea that they might be capable of further development challenged fundamental beliefs about their place in the galaxy. Teacher Sora mentioned that humans reached space through cooperation, Vexithara said, changing the subject slightly. How many individuals were actually involved in your species' space program? Taemin pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's space exploration history. Our first moon landing required the direct participation of over 400,000 people. But if you count all the supporting industries, research institutions, and educational systems that made it possible, the number approaches several million. Millions of humans working toward a single goal? This seems impossibly complex to coordinate. It was complex, certainly. But complexity allowed us to solve problems that no individual or small group could have managed alone. We had specialists in metallurgy, propulsion systems, life support, navigation, communications, and hundreds of other fields. Each person contributed their unique knowledge and skills. Vexithara studied the holographic timeline, tracing the progression from early rocket experiments to successful lunar missions. Kethmori space travel was achieved by 17 individuals who conquered the resources and knowledge they needed from weaker species. Our method was much more efficient. Efficient in terms of the number of people involved, perhaps. But how long did it take your species to develop space capability compared to humans? The young Kethmori fell silent, processing the uncomfortable realization that human space development had progressed much more rapidly than Kethmori advancement. Despite using collaborative methods that seemed inefficient by predator standards, humans had achieved in decades what took the Kethmori centuries. I do not understand how weakness can produce superior results, Vexithara said, frustration evident in the voice. What if cooperation isn't weakness? What if it's a different kind of strength that your species hasn't explored? Taemin activated another section of the holographic display, showing comparative development timelines for various galactic species. The data revealed an interesting pattern. Species that developed through cooperation consistently achieved technological and social advancement faster than those that relied purely on conquest and dominance. The Xentorans developed faster than light travel 2 centuries before any conquest-based species managed the same breakthrough. Taemin explained. Their mathematical cooperation allowed them to solve equations that would have taken individual geniuses much longer to crack. But they are prey species, weak creatures that band together out of necessity. Are they weak? They've colonized more star systems than the Kethmori, and their technology is more advanced in several key areas. Their mathematical models are used by half the galaxy for navigation and resource management. Vexithara stared at the holographic data with growing confusion. Everything the young Kethmori had been taught about species hierarchy and natural superiority was being challenged by objective evidence. The apex predator worldview suddenly seemed incomplete, rather than definitively correct. Park Sora appeared in the office doorway carrying a cup of tea and a sandwich on a tray. She had changed from her teaching clothes into casual evening wear, but her manner remained professionally caring as she approached Vexthara's desk. I thought you might be getting hungry after working so long on your assignment, she said, setting the tray beside the essay papers. Detention can be exhausting when you're really thinking through difficult concepts. The gesture was so unexpected that Vexthara could only stare at the offered food. No prey species had ever voluntarily approached a Kethmori, much less brought refreshments during what was supposed to be punishment. The kindness was more disorienting than any threat or challenge could have been. Why are you bringing me food? Vexithara asked. Because you've been working hard for 6 hours and probably haven't eaten since lunch. Taking care of students is part of being an educator. But I intimidated your class. I released dominance pheromones and threatened other students. Sora sat down in a chair across from the detention desk, her posture relaxed and non-threatening. Yes, you did those things. That's why you're serving detention. But you're also a student who is clearly capable of learning and growth. The fact that you're here working on this assignment proves that you want to understand rather than simply repeat the same behaviors. How do you know I will not intimidate students again tomorrow? I don't know that. But I have faith in your ability to make better choices once you understand the consequences of intimidation. That's what education is about. Giving people the knowledge and tools they need to make decisions that help rather than harm. Vexithara picked up the sandwich with claws that were designed for tearing flesh, handling the simple food with surprising delicacy. Teacher Sora, what happens to students who cannot learn to make better choices? In my experience, every student can learn if we find the right approach. Some students need more time, some need different methods, and some need extra support. But I've never met a student who was incapable of growth. Even apex predators? Especially apex predators. You have intelligence, curiosity, and strength that could be channeled toward incredible achievements. The question is whether you want to use those abilities to intimidate others or to accomplish something meaningful. As the evening progressed, Vexithara finished both the sandwich and the essay assignment. The writing had become easier as unfamiliar concepts began to make sense. For the first time in the young Kethmori's life, examination of behavior had led to genuinely useful insights, rather than simple justification for predetermined actions. 4 months had passed since Vexithara's first detention, and Galactic Academy Station had settled into a new rhythm that nobody could have predicted. The young Kethmori had not only adapted to Academy life, but had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a cooperative apex predator. The transformation had not happened overnight. There had been additional detentions in the early weeks as Vexithara struggled to replace instinctual dominance behaviors with more constructive approaches to social interaction. But each essay assignment had deepened the young predator's understanding of how cooperation could achieve results that pure strength could not. Lee Tae-min stood in his office reviewing final semester evaluations, preparing for the graduation ceremony that would take place the following day. Vexithara's academic record showed consistent improvement across all subjects, with particular excellence in interspecies diplomacy and comparative cultural studies. More importantly, the behavior reports showed a complete reversal from the intimidating presence who had arrived 4 months ago. Park Sora entered the office carrying a stack of final projects from her galactic ethics class. Have you seen Vexithara's final presentation yet? It's remarkable work. I'm looking forward to it. The subject matter should be particularly interesting given the source. Cooperation strategies among apex predator species, a Kethmori perspective. On galactic development, Sora read from her tablet. The research is thorough, the analysis is sophisticated, and the conclusions challenge some fundamental assumptions about predator behavior. Through the office windows, they could see Vexithara in the main common area, surrounded by students from a dozen different species. The group was working together on final preparations for the graduation ceremony, with the young Kethmori serving as project coordinator. It was a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just months earlier. The transformation extended beyond academics. Vexithara had discovered that protective instincts could be redirected from dominance toward guardianship. Smaller students who had once fled in terror now sought out the Kethmori's help, with problems ranging from academic difficulties to social conflicts. The apex predator's natural strength had become a source of security rather than fear. Kang. Dongwu appeared in the doorway with his daily security report. Administrator Lee, we have an incoming message from the Kethmori fleet. War Commander Zenthkala is requesting permission to attend tomorrow's graduation ceremony. Tae-min and Sora exchanged glances. They had been expecting some form of official Kethmori response to Vexithara's academic progress, but the timing suggested that the War Commander had been monitoring the situation more closely than anyone had realized. Grant permission for the War Commander's attendance, Tae-min replied. Standard diplomatic protocols. No special accommodations beyond normal courtesy for visiting officials. Sir, should I inform Vexithara about the War Commander's arrival? No need. Vexithara will find out soon enough, and I suspect our student is prepared for whatever questions or challenges the visit might bring. The graduation ceremony took place in the station's main assembly hall, with seating arranged to accommodate the varied physiological needs of different species. Families and officials from across the galaxy had traveled to witness their young people complete this unique educational experience. War Commander Zenthkala arrived precisely on schedule, accompanied by 2 junior officers and wearing full ceremonial armor that gleamed under the assembly hall's lighting. The Kethmori delegation took their assigned seats without incident, though their presence created a visible tension among some of the other attending families. Tae-min opened the ceremony with remarks about the importance of interspecies education and cooperation, in building a peaceful galactic future. As he spoke, he noticed Vexithera sitting calmly among the graduating students, showing no signs of the anxiety that might have been expected when facing judgment from the species' military leadership. Individual academic achievements were recognized. First, with students receiving certificates and commendations for excellence in various fields of study. When Vexithara's name was called for the award in interspecies diplomacy, War Commander Zenthkala's golden eyes narrowed with what appeared to be surprise or confusion. The final portion of the ceremony featured student presentations on topics of their choice. Vexithara was scheduled to present last, which meant the entire assembly would witness the young Kethmori's final academic work before graduation. When the moment arrived, Vexithara approached the podium with the confident bearing that marked all members of the species, but without the threatening posture that had characterized the early weeks at the academy. The young predator activated the holographic display and began to speak in clear, measured tones. Fellow students, honored families, and distinguished guests, I am here today to discuss cooperation strategies among apex predator species and their potential for contributing to galactic development. The assembly hall fell completely silent. Never in recorded history had a Kethmori publicly advocated for cooperation over conquest. 4 months ago, I arrived at this academy believing that strength meant domination, and that cooperation was a weakness displayed by inferior species. Today, I understand that true strength lies in using our abilities to lift others up rather than tear them down. Vexithara's presentation methodically dismantled traditional Kethmori assumptions about superiority and dominance. Using data from academic research, historical analysis, and personal observations from life at the academy, the young predator demonstrated that cooperative species consistently outperformed conquest-based civilizations in areas ranging from technological development to long-term stability. The Kethmori possess intelligence, physical capability, and natural leadership qualities that could contribute enormously to galactic civilization if we chose to use these gifts for construction. Rather than destruction, we could become protectors rather than predators, guides rather than conquerors. War Commander Zenthkala shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Vexithara continued the presentation. The young Kethmori was not denouncing their species' heritage, but rather suggesting ways that traditional strengths could be redirected toward more constructive purposes. I propose that apex predator species have a responsibility to use our advantages in service of the greater galactic community. Our strength should protect the vulnerable, our intelligence should solve complex problems, and our natural authority should guide others toward positive achievements. The presentation concluded with specific recommendations for how the Kethmori could transition from a conquest-based civilization to a cooperative partner in galactic development. The suggestions were practical, respectful of species pride, and demonstrated thorough understanding of both Kethmori culture and broader galactic dynamics. When Vexithara finished speaking, the assembly hall erupted in applause from students and families representing dozens of species. The young Kethmori had articulated a vision that offered hope for peaceful coexistence between predator and prey species throughout the galaxy. After the formal ceremony ended, War Commander Zenthkala approached Vexithara in the reception area. The two Kethmori faced each other in a moment that would have significant implications for their species' future. Young Vexithara, the War Commander said, his voice carrying the authority of millennia of military tradition. You have said things today that no Kethmori has ever said before. Some would call your words treasonous to our heritage. War Commander, I have said things that honor the best aspects of our heritage while acknowledging that we are capable of growth. Is it treasonous to suggest that the Kethmori could become even greater than we already are? Zenthkala studied the young predator for a long moment. You have learned much during your time among these humans, perhaps too much. I have learned that strength without wisdom is merely violence, and that wisdom without compassion is merely cleverness. The humans taught me that true apex predators protect the pack rather than dominate it. Taman approached the two Kethmori, carrying Vexithara's official graduation certificate and academic transcripts. War Commander, Your student has been exceptional during the time here. The Academy would be honored to have Vexithara return as a teaching assistant if there is interest in continuing this educational exchange. You would trust a Kethmori to teach other species? Xanthikala asked. We would trust this Kethmori to teach other species. Vexithara has demonstrated the qualities that make excellent educators: knowledge, patience, and genuine concern for student development. War Commander Xanthikala departed without giving a definitive answer about future educational exchanges, but his final words to Vexithara were telling. You have given me much to consider, young one. Perhaps it is time for the Kethmori to consider new definitions of strength. 6 months later, Galactic Academy Station received its second Kethmori student, followed by 2 more the next semester. Vexithara had indeed returned as a teaching assistant, specializing in helping apex predator species adapt to cooperative learning environments. The young Kethmori's office was decorated with letters from former classmates who had gone on to successful diplomatic careers, as well as a framed copy of the original detention essay that had started everything.